Welcome to I Am the White Rabbit. My name's Nicola Charles. I've got a fantastic guest today. I've actually been a fan of his for a while. He's known on X as Shallow Chal, and it's quite funny. His name's Scotty Challen. And I've really admired you for a long time, Scotty, because you're just one of those Australians that seems really smart and really awake, but also quite brave. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you so much, Nicola. It's great to be here, and I really appreciate you reaching out and having the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm a big fan of your work as well, and I regret that I had not reached out to you sooner to speak because you're clearly very intelligent. You know what you're doing, so well done.
Oh well, there are many people, including Anthony Albanese, that would disagree with that. So what you do is you talk. For me, you're like Australia's regular dad, right? You talk a lot of sense, and you try and give your advice to people online, and then very much like me, people take your clips and they put them in other places that you're not even aware of, and then you end up sort of going viral, and you don't even know it's happened. How do you feel about the passage of information in Australia at the moment? Because I think because they've tried to control everything so much, I always get concerned that, when it comes to sort of an awake person or a smart person or a regular person who sees what's going on, they end up pushing us into rooms where we're only talking to other people who are like us. So I worry that we're not actually waking up the people who don't know this information and don't think about it.
I'm not too concerned about the information being shared. I do agree with you that it can feel like we're in a bit of a bubble sometimes, especially even if you've got a growing audience. And I mean, look at your X account, it's massive. You get huge amounts of impressions and reach, and it can feel like we're in a bit of an echo chamber, I guess. I always know when I've accidentally clicked on the for you button instead of the following button because I go, what is this trash that I'm looking at here? And then I realize that I'm looking at propaganda and spin
Yeah,
and more lies. So the other side are also in their own bubble,
yeah,
in many ways. But I think that what we are in now is the hangover from COVID, which is the hangover from the war on terror, which is the hangover from generational persecution against Australians. And you don't have to travel very far these days to talk to what I would call a normie. Let's call them normies, and find that most of them know someone who's either been affected by someone who was involved in the forever wars, or B, was affected by the COVID jabs or the way lockdowns were implemented, or C, is extremely worried about the digital ID and the erosion of our freedoms and our culture in Australia. So, this movement and alignment of people that we've been searching for years and years, I think we're winning. I think we're gaining ground, and I think we're bringing more and more people to the fold. And I think the way we ran March for Australia, and we'll touch on that no doubt on August 31, saw a huge groundswell of people, regardless of the idea or concept of neo-Nazis being involved. They just went, you know what, I want to say something. And they turned out for that. And I think that's why I've been able to build an audience, because I've only been doing the social media stuff for 2 years. And there was only an odd. I made a TikTok as a bit of a joke because I was having a laugh with my teenage girls, and that TikTok went viral. And all I was talking about was the comparison in building costs in Thailand versus Australia. And people resonated with that and went, I can't afford to buy a house because the government's taking 50% of everything that you pay in taxes to build a house. Whereas in Thailand, the cost to build a house was $60,000 to $100,000. Here it was, $500,000 to $600,000. So there's a reason for it, and our country's falling apart at the edges, and it's happening a lot quicker now, and a lot of people can see it. So I'm quite encouraged by what's happening around us.
yeah. I hope so. I do see sort of doubt creeping into the normies' minds with regard to, they're not well or they've been missing from their jobs for a while. My husband's in construction and he sees it all the time as well. And then when they return to work and they've got these diagnoses of, oh, I've got an immune disorder, and, they didn't have it before, they're starting to think, well, how come? Because I didn't have this before 2020, but it just seems so slow and it's really super frustrating. I came to Australia. The good thing about me is they can't accuse me of not liking migrants because I am one, because I came here.
Well, you and 35% of the population.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
and no one's got a problem with that. The fact that we have so many people like here, like yourself, for example. It's more so that it's not being managed correctly. We
Oh,
know that, and
so
and
bad.
now it's being used as a tool of control
Yeah.
to subjugate our own citizens within our own country.
When I came here in the early 90s, it was because my then Australian boyfriend, who I'd met in London, and we'd lived together in London for 2 years, and it never entered my head that he'd want to come back to Australia. And my mum said to me, "Are you sure you want to be in love with an Australian? It's a long way away. Aren't you worried that one day he might say, 'Hey, I'm going home'? And it's a 28-hour flight away." And I said, "Nah, he loves London." And then within about 6 months, he was offered a job back here in Australia, in Queensland, actually. And he was like, "Hey, you want to go live in Australia?" And I'd been here for work a couple of times as a model. And I loved it, absolutely loved Melbourne. Because Melbourne then was like a little mini London,
Yeah,
but better,
yeah,
with better
great
weather.
vibe,
Great
great city.
shops, great clubs, great bars, great restaurants. Still love it now, but it's just, I do feel a bit like a stranger in my own city in Melbourne now. But he told me very wisely, and he was no guy for giving out sort of advice and stuff like that, and he certainly wasn't political, and still isn't. And this is an ex-boyfriend of mine from a long time ago. But he said to me when I got to Australia, you need to be very careful down under, because this isn't London. And, it looked so pretty and sunny and, tourist destination. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, Australia, you need to get in the mindset. It's a bit like the Wild West." And I said, "What do you mean, the Wild West?" And he said, "Well, the police are corrupt, the politicians are corrupt." And I thought, honestly, Scotty, I thought he was nuts. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then I ended up spending 20 years in television, again, not thinking about it. I was slightly ostracized, slightly being a very minimal word for what happened to me, slightly ostracized in the acting community because I was a conservative and a Christian, and they were all sort of lefty liberals, and it was all very strange. They definitely ostracized me for my beliefs and just for being a conservative. And I started to think, there is something deeper going on here. There's like a mass, not a mass psychosis, but there was definitely this willful blindness to a lot of what was going on. And I think so many people, and look, I want to be one of these people, right? I want to be a person who lives my life and organizes my life and my career and the way I earn money and my family without ever having to think about politics. I never liked politics. I didn't study politics. I'm not interested. But we've reached a point in history whereas if we don't focus on what we're told our politicians and this bureaucracy are doing, we are actually sleepwalking into something, and people don't realize it. And because the plan is kind of incremental with regard to the things they're doing. Although I did say this morning on radio, Scotty, that I think they screwed up, and I'll tell you why. And
Yeah,
it's it's
I think they have to.
yeah, it's a
Yeah,
big screw up, because I am so proud to be in Australia now and living here, and I love the people in the place. That if in say 2018, 2019, when I was on radio, when I was allowed to be, they'd said to me, "Oh, you've been here a long time. Have an Australian digital ID and be an Australian," I would have got it. Because I would have been so excited to sort of be accepted as an Australian. I'd have it on my phone. And instead of all this stuff we saw from 2020 to now, where Facebook would censor you and Twitter would chuck you off and YouTube and all that stuff, they would have just done it digitally. "Oh, unfortunately, you said something bad and you can't access that app." Instead, I think they got so excited with their other stuff, let's say their medical stuff, that they did that first. And now it makes sense to me that they cannot move forward anymore. They're stuck. They've snookered themselves. It's a bit checkmatey, right? Because these 8,000 people that seem to govern and make decisions for 8 billion are worried. I think they're scared because, and if we don't adhere to digital ID, they're not going to control 8 billion people, and they're certainly not going to control their speech and opinions, right?
yeah, yeah. They're definitely concerned. But look, this has been a long time coming. It's been a control system ambition of theirs from the start, and I guess that we've all reached this place now where we can visibly see it happening around us. We're at
Mm.
the pointy end of the spear now. This slow, creep towards totalitarianism and this weird fascistic, control that they want to, deploy across the planet is all starting to emerge because technology has reached the point where they can do that. And we're here having a Zoom conversation today because Zoom became possible during COVID, really. The technology for this really emerged then. And so with that, all these wonderful luxuries that we have comes these digital chains that they're trying to impose on us now as well, which will include a digital ID. But, we are, ever since, 2001, when the Twin Towers collapsed, we've been at war with a faceless enemy constantly. And if you think about this, we have fought the war on terror, a faceless enemy that you couldn't see, smell, hear, or touch. And that was deployed across the country, a control system where you were suddenly patted down and forced to remove your shoes and belt at the airport every time you got on a plane. And, we fought a forever war deploying resources overseas to an enemy over there that was here for some reason. And then we fought against a virus that you couldn't see, touch, hear, or smell, and its symptoms were asymptomatic, so there were no symptoms. And now you're in a fight against, this one's always been there, the climate, that you can't see, touch, hear, or feel, that is apparently collapsing around you as I stare out at my beautiful blue day in Queensland here. And the jacarandas are blossoming exactly at the date that they always blossom here. It's never changed. But the climate is trying to kill me now, this faceless, nameless terror, this constant mass psychosis of the people of the planet, and especially in our first world nations, especially here in Australia, because it's a testing ground for a lot of this stuff that they roll out. Look, the UK might be 5 to 8 years ahead of us culturally in the problems that they're having. The US has its own issues, but we might see a little bit of pullback there. They can only go so far, and then they pull back a little to give us a little bit of breathing space before the next round of push for control comes again. They want you fat, yeah, 100%.
This is what you do with a dog. Your dog misbehaves and chews up the couch. You put it back in the little cage and you make it behave. And then when it's behaved and calmed down, you let it out again. It's so sad that we're Pavlov's dog.
We are, but we're also human cattle. This is a human farm, and I know many of your listeners and yourself might have gone down that pathway and come to that conclusion before. We are tax cattle for the blob, the giant bureaucratic blob that runs this place, and we will be bled for our taxation and our services and our energy. And because you are a free-thinking type of cattle, we need to replace you with a cattle that doesn't think as well as you do. So we're going to import massive amounts of people from third world countries who will be grateful for their digital ID, who will be grateful, as you said yourself, if you could have had one, you would have taken it because it made you feel like you were part of the country. The problem with the cattle here, us, we are the cows, is that we've got a problem with losing our freedoms. So what we need to do, what they need to do, and if you think about this from the perspective of a human farm, which is what this is, we need to replace these cattle that give us a hard time with cattle that are grateful for their subsistence living.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening in Australia around you right now.
Oh God, that's really scary.
It's horrible, isn't it? It's absolutely awful. And the way they do that is to create 15-minute cities that are owned by BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, and they will put you in a box and they will turn you on and turn you off at their whim and their pleasure. And if you show any form of dissent in the form of questioning the climate narrative or questioning the forever wars or questioning this week's virus, they will turn you off. And that's what will happen. And you will be stuck in your prison box. So this has never been about creating a prosperous nation in Australia. It's always been about control and bleeding you for your energy and resources. This is a spiritual battle. You mentioned Christianity. We fight against darkness and principalities here that are hell-bent on turning this into a living human farm. And we as free-thinking Australian citizens, I emphasise that word, have a right to say no. And unfortunately, our politics has been so subverted over the last 50 years, ever since the Second World War, pretty much, that we have lost our ability to have any control over our government. And they are runaway. They are in there. They know that this is the last throw of the dice. If they don't get a hold of it, they will lose control of it. And that's because we are at the pointy end of the battle.
I often think when I look at these so-called civil servants, I feel I know that they're not.
They're not civil, and they're certainly not servants to us.
No, that's right. They're neither of those things. They haven't sworn the correct oaths, and they're working under a corporation, which, as per the Governance, Performance and Accountability Act of 2013, is legally separate from the Commonwealth. Who's the Commonwealth? Us. I often think when I look at these people, these administrators in the bureaucracy, let's say, I often think that they are actually only talking to the new Australians. They use new Australians in their clips. They show new Australians going into homes, and they never seem to address any of the concerns of the OG, the original Australians, and I find it really weird. You know, if you're not here in Australia, because I've got viewers in the United States and the UK, all of the signage, all of the pictures, you know, and look, I'm a migrant, so I've always been from a multicultural society. I came from one in London, but it's not multicultural anymore because there are no OG original Australians except in the posters for the mRNA injections. Then it's a happy middle-aged to older retired white couple on a beach looking happy because they've had all their shots. But everything else, when it comes to housing and investments and work particularly, everything is about new Australians. And when they speak, they sort of only speak to and for them, and it's as if the rest of Australians don't exist. And I guess this is why these marches are taking place, right? These marches by Australians, and all are welcome in these marches by Australians, because my advice to other migrants and other new Australians is this: if you really want to be a new Australian, it's not about doing what Labor tell you to do. It's about listening to Australians and becoming an Australian and understanding that culturally Australians are not in a happy place right now.
Australians are in a really, really bad place right now. This isn't that house that should have its arms open to the world, inviting more people in. This house is struggling. It can't afford the people that are here currently, and our own citizens, or about 250,000 of them, are living under bridges and in parks around Australia, homeless. We've got a generation of children that are growing up living in cars. That's not an exaggeration. This is a fact. We all know. Your audience knows. You go to any public place with a bridge and maybe a waterline or a creek or a river, anywhere in southeast Queensland, there's a camp there of humans living in tents in cars. Now, the bureaucracy here are undermining the Australian citizens by giving away our wealth and our sovereignty to everyone who wants to come here. They have no control over our borders because all they're interested in is propping up a GDP number and replacing you free-thinking, beautiful people with a breed of people that are more than happy just to say thank you very much for having me here. The bureaucracy in Australia is definitely a runaway train. I got into this battle because for 16, coming into 17 years, I've been self-employed with my own business. I'm a carpenter by trade. I run a licensed building company on the east coast of Australia. And I also have a number of e-commerce businesses where we sell building products around Australia. Now, because of that e-commerce background, it's the only reason I haven't gone broke as a builder in Australia, because 7,000 of them have gone under in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. Think about that. 7,000 builders have gone under in the last 2 years. Hundreds and hundreds of families. There would be hundreds of suicides in that 7,000. Why isn't that making the front page of the newspaper? It isn't. No one's talking about it. So we started creating content about the collapse of the middle class of Australia. And as everyone knows, we only do two things in Australia now. We mine shit out of the ground and send it overseas for everyone else to use and burn. And we build houses. That's all we do here. We can't manufacture anything else. We're no good at doing anything else because the government doesn't let us do anything else, because its control system, climate emissions, bureaucracy, layers, prevents us from doing anything. Now, the biggest mistake I made as a businessman in the last 16 years, and I had a really good think about this the other day, the biggest mistake I made was actually trying to grow a business and employ Australians. All I should have done was just kept buying houses. I mean, that's, think about it. As a carpenter and a builder, I should have just gone, you know what, I'm just going to buy houses and renovate and rent them out and build a massive property portfolio. That would have been the simplest and easiest way for me to get wealthy in this country. And in my mind, that's despicable. That's absolutely despicable. Because as appealing as that might be, and I have the skill set to do that, the reality is that I've employed hundreds and hundreds of Australians over the last 16 years, helped feed families, helped them pay their mortgages, and also contributed millions of dollars to a government at three levels, ANCIL, state and federal, in revenue that they're now using to weaponise against me from running my own business in this country. Now, last year, I got a payroll tax bill from the state government here that was $150,000 that I had 7 days to pay. because I had exceeded the threshold of the amount of money I'm allowed to pay people. You think about that. I gave people jobs and employed people, but I'm going to be penalised for doing that. I'm not some multinational corporate entity here that's feeding all my profits offshore, like, say, Pfizer or someone else. We're Australians employing Australians, but we're going to penalise you for that. And hypothetically, if I wasn't a diversified business, that payroll tax bill alone would have bankrupted me. So we are in a really difficult place here right now, and the bureaucracy's got us all by the hamstrings. The reason for that, though, is because 30% of our politicians in Australia at all three levels are lawyers. They're lawyers. You employ lawyers, you get laws. You employ builders, you build things. We don't vote builders in. We don't vote tradespeople in. And my personal feeling is that the great army in this country that's about to be awakened and activated, and why these marches have been so successful, is the great Australian tradesmen. Because I've got to tell you, I think they're pissed off, and I think they've realised that they've just had their country sold out from underneath them. And when you piss off a bunch of tradies, shit's going to get ugly. Like, your boyfriend warned you about the Australian nature that when we get angry, we'll throw fists. We get angry. We'll have an argument, right? And then we'll shake hands and be mates afterwards. But that's the Australian culture. That's what we do. And I think that we're about to activate a very powerful force within the Australian culture. I'm not saying that we physically fight people, but what I'm saying is that there's a whole bunch of politicians and bureaucrats that have gone a little bit too far and about to find out that the Australians are pretty pissed off. This is
I
what's
think
happening.
they're scared, Scotty, and that's why they want digital ID. It's a control management system, because they couldn't possibly control and manage all these people without AI listening in and wiretapping you and, oh, what are they talking about? And did they say, the code words, and we need to start recording? And it's true what you say, because look at the UK. So Keir Starmer is the former Crown prosecutor. And I've said many times, no one knows Crown law better than a Crown prosecutor, right?
Wasn't he a human rights lawyer at some stage as well? Like, isn't that like what part
some
of
of
his
the worst
background?
people I've ever met are
Human
rights
right. Yeah. Cattle lawyers, mate.
But it's really devastating about the manufacturing side of things, and as you say, creating employment, because where I am in the southeast of Melbourne, there are no, and it's the same everywhere, I understand, there are no sort of factories or commercial entities really building anything. You've got companies selling stuff. You can get tires and you can get lawn mowers and all that kind of stuff. But what we do have is hectares and hectares of these massive distribution centres with their little funnels off the side for trucks, because we're just literally living off the tit of imported crap from China. That's what we're doing. And
that's right.
It's devastating, because you think, well, anything could happen politically or militarily and we'd be cut off from the rest of the world. Australia doesn't make cars anymore. Very few places make furniture. I don't think people realise it. It used to be, and I love my furniture and interior design and antiques and stuff like that. It used to be, and you still can some places if you're rich, but it used to be you could walk into a furniture store and choose a couch, and they would say, yep, great, we've got 7 of those out the back and we'll deliver that to you on Monday. All these places are now is almost like catalogue shops, because you go in and you say, I want that couch, and they say, oh, great, they'll make it in China, it will be here in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
You're like, what? You don't actually have that couch? I can't buy that couch today. We don't do anything, right?
In 2015, Tony Abbott, the great conservative hero, and I'm critical of conservatives, I always have been. And even though I am, more conservative leaning in my politics as well, with a good splash of libertarianism in there. 2015, Tony Abbott signed the China Free Trade Agreement, the CHAFTA. Right now, so we signed a free trade agreement with a country that pays third world wages to slave labour.
Yep.
And at that point then, the Australian manufacturing industry was destined to die. That was always going to happen. And we did that so we could sell more iron ore and coal to China, and then flagellate ourselves on the altar of climate change by not burning the stuff ourselves, to put the final nail into the coffin of the Australian manufacturing industry. Now, great, China has built a massive, wealthy, prosperous nation out of that, with the largest military in the world. And when China decides that they're going to take things, they're going to take it. You don't build a military and double their nuclear arsenal in the last 4 years, which is what they've done. And I'm an ex-defense guy, so I look at the military stuff closely. Plus, I don't trust human beings from other countries. Like, I don't trust the nature of these governments, especially socialist and communist vented, more fascist type governments anyway, without trying to understand what the play is here. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but we have our F-18 Growlers, our Super Hornets based up here at Amberley, and I'm ex-Air Force. I was based out at Amberley. We had a guy break into that base the other night and spend 3 hours running amok, stole a forklift, drove it around the hangars. We have 12 F-18s. That's all we own. And that guy could have literally, if he was motivated, knew what he was doing, taken out all 12 of those F-18s, and we would not have been able to stop it. Australia, you are toothless. We have no teeth. We have a capacity to throw one punch when the crunch comes. And I hate to sound like a warmonger, but I'm not, because I believe in having a strong deterrence. Because when you don't have a strong deterrence, you end up like Ukraine. You end up putting 1.5 million white guys in the ground trying to defend your country from being invaded. Now, I don't have a dog in the fight in the Russia-Ukraine war. That's a completely different thing. But as an example of how human conflict works, when the shit hits the fan, when this country has undermined you enough, and when the inevitable war with the Middle Kingdom does come, they're going to sacrifice all the Australian men. That's what will happen. And then the girls will be next. So Australia, it's time to wake up and realise what's happening here. They're stealing everything from you, and when they're good and ready, they'll sacrifice you. And that sounds really heavy, but that's how history works. That's what's happening.
It's awful that we have to live under this veil, because you can imagine all these kids who are like, they've been caught smoking pot or jaywalking or not paying their taxes or saying Anthony Albanese's a prick online or anything like that. And, their social credit score with all the data stored in China or Tasmania, I hear. Apparently the data centers are in Tasmania. Their credit, mine will be like a -1 million social credit score. They're all in the toilet, but you're right. Should we go to war, suddenly, you'll get the call, you'll get a notification on your digital ID. Oh, hello, friend. Hello, loyal Australian. Would you like to...
Your country needs you.
Yes,
your country, it's not would you like to, it's your country needs you, and you will be required to be here. And failure to comply means that you will no longer be able to purchase food.
And all of a sudden it's the Commonwealth again, right? All of a sudden it's like you have an allegiance to the Commonwealth. Where's our Commonwealth Parliament? We don't have one. That's okay. You'll still be required to show an allegiance to your non-Commonwealth Parliament. Thank you very much. Who's telling me to go? Corporate administrators. Right. Gotcha. I'll get on the plane.
I think it was, we have this illusion of our capacity as a country here. We're told that everything's fine. We're prosperous. We're wealthy. We're doing great. We know we're not doing great. The turnout at the March for Australia on August the 31st was a clear indication that things are very wrong. We were looking for a signal on that day. And we thought that 500 people were going to turn up in Brisbane. We had closer to 15,000, right? And so, we thought maybe 500 if we're lucky. We were chewing our fingers all day, thinking, is anyone going to show up? We had 15,000 people. We had 50 counter-protesters. We had about 20 neo-Nazis turn up in their blackout to try and show their presence. They were surrounded by Aussie patriots who just went, we're not taking that bullshit, mate. That's not going to happen. And they weren't allowed to speak up here in Brisbane, and we kept a hold of things. We did a really good job of it, and it was a great event. But it's a scream and a cry from the Australian people that things are not right. Things are wrong here. There's something really wrong. And we don't want our sons and daughters to be sent off to some shitty war that we're not prepared for, living in some shitty control system, ID society, where you don't have the freedom to do what you want. Now, I've got a bunch of young guys working for me as apprentices, driving their Nissan Patrols with their lift suspension and their giant wheels and their loud exhausts. And personally, I find their vehicles kind of offensive because they're loud and they don't smoke. But it occurred to me that you guys are our future, and I want you to have the freedom to own that vehicle, and I'm going to celebrate you owning that vehicle, But they don't want you to own stuff like that in Australia, which is why they're moving to EVs, so they can switch you on and switch you off. And it's part of the reason. Petrol, they announced the other week that we're going to be phasing out petrol by 2035 in Australia. 2035, no more petrol. I can't see anyone building any more coal-fired power stations or nuclear power plants. I just got back from 10 days in the Middle East. I've been in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and drove down to Saudi Arabia and had a look at things over there. Australians that don't leave their country have no idea what the rest of the world is doing. And I can tell you what the rest of the world is doing. They're doing exactly what they want. They're building power stations everywhere. Dubai just finished building its first nuclear reactor. They've got desalination plants everywhere. And they've got 8-lane freeways where you can do 160 kilometers an hour. Over here, they're talking about reducing the speed limit to 100 nationally so we can save lives. I mean, I'm the nanny state that's encroached into this prison system that we live here isn't going to allow you to be efficient. Now, Dubai, for their 160 kilometre an hour roads, has a lane that the trucks have to stay in, and the trucks have to do 80. So the trucks are in this lane, they do 80. Everyone else is in the other 3 lanes doing 160. And it works.
That's like the
But in
autobahn in
Australia,
Germany. I was
yeah,
terrified on the autobahn in Germany when I was working there while I worked in Munich and Hamburg. And they pick you up from the airport and they're in their yellow sort of sand coloured Mercedes Benz, because all the taxis in Germany are Mercedes Benz. And they get on the autobahn and you think, this is it, this is the end of me. They're going so fast, it's unbelievable. There's no speed limit on the autobahn.
yeah. And
But you're
but
right. I mean,
they've decided that works for them. Yeah, they're
how?
comfortable with the death toll or the road toll the way it is, and the cars have
Yeah.
never been safer.
Well, you
So.
don't. No one's forcing you to go on that road, are they? You
No,
don't have
plus no
to.
one's forcing you to do 160 kilometres an hour in Dubai. I mean, I was
Yeah.
quite comfortable doing 120, 130 in my rented Camaro that I was driving. And I was comfortable doing that speed. You know, I'd set the cruise control and I stayed in the right lane, and everyone just kept zipping past me. But I'm comfortable. I made a choice to do that speed. That was my
Well,
choice.
I have a little bit of tech from my technology people. I'm connected with some really good technology people in Australia. I know why they want to reduce the speed limits in Australia. That's because, and it's also why car designs have changed and the front windows have become like giant bubbles and they can see your legs and between the seats and all that. Well, A, the cameras need to be able to pick you up. So the slower the speed, the more likely the cameras can pick you up. And also, if you do get a digital ID, this is another warning, and actually phones are already capable of doing this. Because of the GPS tracker technology, your
Yeah.
phone connected to a satellite knows how fast you're going. So when you've got your digital ID, the money will already come out of your bank account. And these new
Yep.
cars, the electric vehicles, you won't find them going onto work sites. I've seen these electric utes, so I don't rate them very much because there's no torque. There's no torque in that at all. And B, these electric vehicles eventually as well are also going to report you, the owner, the person that paid for the vehicle. Much like these phones are going to be our own spy device that we pay for. How are they going to create a law that you have to carry a smartphone and pay for it yourself? It's not possible
Well,
to be. It's
then it'll be an
ridiculous.
implant. They'll implant you with something,
Oh, they're
right?
not in. They're
That'll
not
be the digit.
implanting me.
Look, to make it easier for you and to stop mass immigration, this is I mean, Keir
Oh, come
Starmer
on.
trying the gaslighting that's required here to justify the digital ID and using it against immigration is the mental gymnastics involved in that is astounding. But this is where it'll head to. We need to implant this into you because having a phone is inconvenient.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, everything that we've talked about for years now, we've all thought about, is all happening around you. And the normies they can see that now. They can see it unfolding, and they're starting to ask questions because they are informed. And I saw a great Facebook page the other day that was called Tradies for Babies. And
Oh,
3,500 followers in 3 days.
oh my
3 days. Tradies for Babies to try and encourage, dads to be good dads and to support women, and they're anti-abortion. Now, look, people make choices. Young people do dumb things, like all sorts of stuff happens. We've all been there, right? But it was really encouraging me to see a page that was focused on tradies, because I do believe that that's part of the element that will save our country.
God.
Sharing an ethos that was about saving human life and protecting our citizens. Now, one of the things that our migrant communities are really good at is having babies. They're really good at it. Like, they
Really?
come here and they have 7, 8, 9 of them. We have one of the fastest growing medical industries in Australia is IVF treatment. And that's for all the girl bosses that didn't have kids in their 30s and waited till they were in their 40s. And then they end up on the IVF, train, dropping $100,000 plus to try and have a baby. Now, no one's begrudging them the medical option to do that. We live in a semi-free society, so they can make those choices. But, we are a nation that isn't breeding or supporting the growth of our own communities, our own Anglo-Celtic heritage. But we're just going to bring in millions of migrants from all sorts of places around the world who love having babies. The fastest growing religion in Australia right now is Hinduism. It's Hinduism. It's not Christianity. The second fastest growing is Islam, and so Christianity is at number three. And I'm not going to be get into the bigot idea of my religion's better than yours or vice versa. Everyone has their own belief systems from their culture that they were raised in. But Hinduism isn't the fastest growing religion because they're converting people.
Yeah.
It's because they brought in 1.2 million Indians in the last 5 years. There's a reason for that. And so what are we going to do as Australians? I mean, and people go, oh, you just want to deport everyone or you want to send all the brown people back. Well, I'm not that inclined at all. We've got 2.7 million temporary visa holders in Australia that could potentially return to their own countries and improve their own economies and opportunities over there. And Australia needs to shut the gates and look after its own people first. We need to get our own house in order. Now, Canada and New Zealand have cut their immigration numbers massively. Canada's a really great example. And they saw a 30% decline in their house prices. Now, I own a house. I live in my house that I own. Would I be prepared to accept a 30% decline in the property of my home, in the value of my home? Yes. Yes, I would. Because I've got 4 daughters and I want them to own a house one day as well. We're all going to have to take a hit here to get this thing sorted out.
Yeah.
The Great Australian Housing Ponzi scheme that's financed by our 4 pillars, our banks, which are all owned by BlackRock, Vanguard and State Street. They're all the same shareholders, the most profitable banks in the world. And 80% of their lending is into the residential mortgage market in Australia. So, no one's investing in businesses here because you can't borrow money from the banks to do it. But as a business owner, I go into a bank and I want to buy a house, they will bend over backwards to give me money to buy a house. But if I go in there asking for $500,000 to expand my business, I can give them all the business plans in the world and all the reasons why this will work, I will still get rejected for that loan. So in Australia, not going to happen. The giant housing Ponzi that we live in here.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, no, it's shocking. And I am worried for the young people as well. I've got 2 daughters as well. And, they don't seem to be able to get on this ladder. And, I mean, it would be helpful.
5% house deposits might make a difference, right? So think about that.
No, that's a disaster.
The government's going to guarantee 15% of your home loan. You are creating the conditions for a 2008 style American GFC collapse of the Australian economy.
Yes,
this
and
is
I
what
know
we're
people
creating.
in America who lost their homes. They went into negative equity and the bank took their
100%.
home.
100%. And so when the crunch does come and the government's securing 15% of the residential mortgages in this country, holy cow. All we've done is kick the can down the road for another generation to have to deal with. And that's really despicable. Now, when we started this conversation, I mentioned to you that a house and land package in Australia, about 50% of the cost of that house and land package, might be $1 million, goes to 3 levels of government. 50%. So $500,000 of the money that you're borrowing, let's say you put in a 10% deposit, you're borrowing $900,000. Half of that money, $450,000, will go to state, federal, and local government. And you will be paying that mortgage off for the next 30 years. That $500,000 you'll end up paying back about $2.5 million on. Now, I mean, think about that. That's generational debt. It's criminal. But this is how they trap you. You are debt slaves and tax cattle to this system that is feeding off you energetically. It's going to feed out it's going to suck you dry. And so just so you can make your mortgage payments to keep CBA profitable. That's what's going to happen.
Look, I would believe them more. I would have more faith in their whole rapid and strange migration thing if 2 things weren't occurring. Number one, they're not deporting people who come here and are offered a new start and a new life and then commit crime. They're running around the streets. You've built a surveillance state. People have got the cameras on their homes. We can see them. We know who they are. We don't need to go on social media and say, oh my God, look who it is, and be accused and called names. Everyone can see it on all the news reports, on all the videos and all the photographs, right? Those people are not deported, they're bailed and told to carry on. So you're condoning crime. That is appalling and irresponsible and malfeasant. So that's the first thing they're doing. And the second thing they're doing is they are stating that they want to build homes for these people. But in building these homes, they're going to demolish the Australian housing market, right?
Yeah,
That's what you're saying. So
that's right.
do you think a massive crash is coming in the future?
Not for a while yet, because
But it will
what will
come, right? An adjustment, is that what they call it?
well, an adjustment will happen if they cut migration numbers to zero and kicked out all the temporary visa holders in Australia. You would see a significant adjustment in the Australian housing prices. But put that into perspective. A lot of people said, well, when we shut immigration during COVID, when the borders were shut, we didn't see a pullback in house prices. And the Greens go on about this one all the time, and the great economic illiterates of our lifetime, the Greens. They go, oh, well, the price didn't come back down. No, that's because the banks lowered interest rates to zero. Right, so banks lowered interest rates to zero. Everybody could take $10,000 out of their superannuation, and the banks, the four pillars here, were lending money like crazy to first home buyers, and that propped up the housing market. So we're sitting at 3.8%, I think, for our RBA cash rate at the moment. And so what would happen is if we shut immigration, the banks would instantly go into RBA, please save us mode, and they would start lowering interest rates as quickly as they can, and then creating more incentives for first home buyers to get into the market, like your 5%, maybe it'd be 3%, maybe it'd be 2%, maybe 1%, or maybe they would guarantee 110% of the loan where they pay you to go into debt. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, here's $20,000 as well as a mortgage. So there's lots of different things that the banks would do to protect their interests and the value of their assets in this country. The other thing about pulling back on immigration is it makes your exports more attractive once your dollar starts to rise as well. So things start looking better for Australia economically. There's a lot of give and take in this argument, and economists will pull what I say apart and I'll pull what they say apart. But history shows us that things can change, and it doesn't have to be doom and gloom. The Canadians are recovering. Should people earn money just by sitting on an asset over a period of time? Yes. Should that value increase by 20% a year? No. My house went up 8% in the last 3 months. In the last 3 months, it went up 8%. Now, I've owned this house for 20 years. Should it go up 8% in 3 months? No. I mean, great. On paper, I'm getting wealthier, right? But it's only gone
But
up
that's the
8%.
thing, it is only on paper, right? Unless you're
That's
prepared
it.
to sell your
But
house.
my rates also went up by 10% this year.
Oh my God.
My insurances went up by 15%. And not only that, your state governments are addicted to stamp duty. So every single house that gets sold here under this 5% deposit scheme, your state government, the thieves that they are, this multi-layered government blob, is getting more money. Now, their stamp duty revenues are absolutely crucial for them to service their own debt levels. You're in Victoria. You are $200 billion in state debt down there. $200 billion. Get your head around that number.
We're not. The corporate administrators are. I'm sorry.
But they've
It's
written
not
that
us.
debt. They've written that debt in your name. They've put your name on that debt. You know that, right? You, the citizens of Victoria, are underwriting that debt with your labour, your effort, and your energy. Now, you have an economy in Victoria that turns over about $140 billion a year. You're in hock for a year and a half of your energy, effort, and labour, and they're going to be borrowing more money. Okay, who from? Out of where? From what? And so the only way to service this is to print more and to borrow more from the equity markets overseas, which further undermines the value of your own currency. Your asset might be going up in value, but in relative terms, compared to gold or even Bitcoin, for example, I mean, the crypto guys will love this stuff, your asset actually isn't appreciating in value at all. It's actually going backwards because that printed so much money and undermined the real value of things now.
So do you think that, because there are actually laws that pertain to the Australian property market, they're very worried about it. They're worried about how the pandemic affected the Australian property market. So it is looking like that they would, it's irreversible, that they would irreversibly change the nature, culture, and religion of Australia to bring in migrants to prop up the property market, right? They don't care about the crime on the streets. They don't care about the cultural impact, socio-economic, as long as it props up the property market. Is that what you? Because there's this thing that the death rate, all cause deaths in Australia, is up as of 2024 is up to 16.1%. That's such a lot. It's very, very high, 16.1%. And the replacement rate of Aussies having kids and the migrants all together is 6.6%. So we're going backwards. So the population is shrinking. Now, if you think about that, that would have a terrible effect on the property markets, right? So they're bringing people in. Yeah.
Look, definitely. But once again, we come back to that point of during COVID, they shut the borders and the property prices still went up, right? Because there was a demand there. They created an artificial demand by stimulating the economy, throwing out stimmy cash everywhere, and then banks lowering interest rates to be able to get more people into home loans.
Why couldn't we have just stayed like that? Why couldn't we have just carried on with that thinking?
Because that thinking doesn't allow them to implement the control system. You're talking about two different things here: the mortgage market versus the control system. Now, we started this conversation talking about what we see. I see the human farm being managed by human farmers, and your version, the type of cattle that we are, you aren't good, efficient cattle for control systems. You might be good at paying your mortgage, but these guys over here, they'll pay mortgages and they're easier to control.
We're not obedient. We're naughty and cheeky.
So what's your preference? You're a human farmer. What's your preference for the type of humans that you want to grow? What's it going to be? I'm going to choose. I know it's horrible, right? But I grew up in I grew up in a farming country. I went to an agricultural college. I studied farming, right? And then I became a carpenter and a tradesman and did time in the military. And then I've ended up owning businesses. So from my perspective, I'm looking at going, okay, my worldview has been shaped by the fact that agricultural-based, military-based business owner, carpenter. Well, it's a human farm. Of course it is. We're tax cattle. We pay to live here. We farm, we grow, we produce. We might, we're like dairy cows. We give them revenue.
Yeah.
What's a better version of cattle to have? I'll take the cattle that are easiest to manage. Thanks very much.
But that is so easy and evil, not easy. And I'll tell you something else as well. They are very short-sighted, in my opinion, because they may have believed that they're bringing in obedient cattle for the farm, right?
Yeah.
But the difference is when and this is what I liked about you on all your clips, when we, the everyday Australian or everyday new Australian migrant like myself, get pissed off, what do? We go on peaceful protests, we go online and scream about how pissed off we are, we open our mouths, we start podcasts, and we start questioning authority and questioning the bureaucracy, which I always felt we're free to do, freedom of political expression. Some of the cultures that are coming into Australia, when they get ticked off with leadership or bureaucracy, they handle their grievances in a very different manner, a more violent manner. I'm not saying they will, but overseas, that's what we've seen.
Nepal.
These people wouldn't be safe. These bureaucrats wouldn't be safe because you're not dealing with Australians anymore that will gripe and moan about taxation and the decisions that you're making. You're dealing with people who will take action.
Yeah, to some degree, but you're also at that point where we're creating the digital prison that'll be able to lock them down. You mentioned before that we're not deporting the criminals from these ethnic communities that are causing these problems. The machete offenders down in Victoria, for example.
They can't control them. They can't control them. It's not going to. These machete guys are not going to be any more peaceful if they've got a digital ID. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen.
No, but this gives the police the excuse, or the enforcers, the farmers, the excuse to create a paramilitary style police with an enforcement level that justifies the use of violence.
And but they don't want that. It's only there for revenue collection. It will be you jaywalking or parking in the wrong place.
That's right, yeah, and with the right amount of violent crime, just to keep you in check so they can justify having guns on you at all time.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's evolving here. Those guys are useful idiots. The machete crime criminals are useful idiots.
Mm.
We know that they're being used in this way, to help maintain control of the human farm here.
But
The
they're
machete
punching
bits,
middle-aged ladies in the face at car
yeah,
washes to steal their car. This is
yeah.
not the Australia I've known
But
for
the,
30
but
years.
the police here shot rubber bullets into the crowd at the Shrine of Remembrance during COVID. I can't get past my, complete inability to forgive the policy enforcers, the bureaucrats that allowed that to happen in our
Yeah,
country. When I saw the footage of that, and I'm sorry if I'm segueing a little here, I sat down in my gym and I cried.
me
I
too.
cried. I'm an ex-defense guy. I've got mates that are coppers, and I watched police shoot civilians and citizens at the Shrine of Remembrance. Whether they were right or wrong, it made no difference to me. I'd never seen anything like that in my country. And you remember the footage of that old lady I pushed down the ground and pepper sprayed on the ground? Right? We're sitting here weeping for our country. This movement that's unfolding here now was always going to happen. It was only ever a matter of time
Mm.
before enough forward-thinking, rational Aussies planted their flag in the ground and said, enough is enough. Nicola, this is the point that we're at now.
Yeah.
And I just happen to be a voice. I'm not a leader of this movement. I'm an organizer. I have zero ambition to be a politician, but I'm an Australian that's been around the block long enough, who has the runs on the board, who's made enough mistakes to stand there with credibility, with my face and my name, and say that I represent and I'm talking for a bunch of people that have had enough of this shit. And we're ready to stand there and say, no more. We've crossed the Rubicon. We're not going any further than this. Because essentially, Nicola, there's nowhere else to retreat to. Because if we don't change this now, this is the last roll of the dice for the Australian people. If we don't change this now, and if we don't get a hold of it, we will not get a hold of it. It will only get worse. And this is why I encourage your audience, yourself. It doesn't matter if you're Indian, it doesn't matter if you're Nigerian, put on an Australian shirt, put on an Australian hat, grab your Australian flag, and come and march with us in Australia and celebrate what you wanted to be a part of instead of turning it into the place that you came from.
Yeah, the government would be screwed if we all joined forces, I can tell you that. Well, look, if we ever, as per the Commonwealth Constitution 1900 UK, do get our Commonwealth Parliament, Scotty, I'd love to be in there with you because it would be civil and we could debate what's best for Australians across the floor and hopefully make life better. Where can people find you on social media, Scotty?
If they search Shallow Chal, SHALLOWCHAL, one word,
Yeah.
Shallow Chal, or search my name into Google, into any search engine, you'll find me and links to my social media. I'm on X, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and doing great conversations with people like yourself, Nicola, and just really trying to highlight to people that these events are for you, Australia, and
Yeah.
come along. There's a lot of competing forces out there that are trying to control the narrative right now, but this is a simple one. We are here for Australians. We're not here to fly the Palestinian flag, the Israeli flag, the whatever flag. It's not. This is Australia for Australians, and we want all of you to come and celebrate this with us. So it'd be great to see you there. I will be at the Brisbane event on October the 19th. Events all over Australia, and so get out there and support your country and bring a smile and have a good time. And let's
Yeah.
enjoy this moment as Australians as we build our own country.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Scotty. I really appreciate you talking with me today. Thank you for watching I Am the White Rabbit. My name's Nicola Charles. Hopefully, we'll see you next time.
Very poignant, absolutely spot on. While that was on, I wrote something based on a little bit of what Shallow Chal said. Like he said, Hoya. Perhaps I should put my glasses on so I can read it properly. Hire lawyers, you get laws. Hire builders, you get houses. Hire liars, you get lies. Change the word hire to vote for. Vote for lawyers, you get laws. Vote for builders, you get houses. Vote for liars, you get lies. Now see why we have 250,000 homeless in Australia Too many laws, no straight answers, and foreign and millions of foreign voters. Think about that. If you don't like politics, that's a good thing. I don't like politics. You need to come to the realisation that it's not politics at all. It's your children's life. It's the lives of your children. This is all about your children. They want them. Sorry, say no, they're yours. They can't have them. Say no, you can't have them, they're mine. You can't have the future of my children. It's up to us to leave them a good future, not up to you to steal it. And on that note, I have nothing else to add of any value to that conversation. That was perfect. Absolutely.